The maid answers the billionaire's forgotten phone and saves the CEO from a fraudulent deal. Subscribe to The Maid's Secret for more stories. Don't risk missing the next story. Follow, comment, and share. Let's begin. The Hale mansion stood like a sentinel against the Manhattan skyline, its windows gleaming in the evening light. Inside those walls of privilege, Elena Vasquez moved quietly through marble halls, the soft swish of her uniform the only sound breaking the silence. 6 months working for billionaire CEO Richard Hale, and she still felt like a ghost in his world, seen but never truly noticed. The grandfather clock in the foyer struck 9, its deep chimes reverberating through the emptiness. Elena glanced at her watch, confirming she had 3 more hours of her shift. The night cleaning was her preference. No executives walking through with muddy shoes. No assistants asking her to bring coffee while she mopped. Just her, the quiet, and occasionally Mr. Hale, who rarely acknowledged her existence beyond a distracted nod. "Second floor study next," she murmured to herself, pushing her cleaning cart toward the elevator. The study was her least favorite room, not because it was difficult to clean, but because it felt too intimate. Unlike the sterile perfection of the rest of the mansion, the study held pieces of the real Richard Hale, books with dog-eared pages, half-finished glasses of bourbon, notes scrawled in an impatient hand. Cleaning it felt like trespassing into the mind of a man who had built an empire from nothing but raw ambition and ruthless intelligence. The elevator doors slid open silently onto the second floor. Elena wheeled her cart down the hallway, the plush carpet muffling her steps. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, she could see the city lights spread below like fallen stars. So many lives happening simultaneously, she thought. So many stories unfolding in those distant windows, and none of them knew about hers. Elena paused outside the study door, knocking softly out of habit, though she knew no one was home. Mr. Hale had left an hour ago in a flurry of activity, his security detail and assistant trailing behind him like shadows. Something about an emergency meeting downtown. She'd overheard snippets as she polished the banister. His world was always in crisis, always teetering on the edge of some catastrophe that only he could avert. She pushed open the heavy mahogany door and flicked on the lights. The study illuminated before her. Leather chairs, bookshelves stretching to the ceiling, a desk that cost more than her parents' house back in Arizona. Elena sighed and began her routine, dusting bookshelves first, careful not to disturb his precise organization system. 20 minutes into cleaning, as she approached the massive desk by the windows, she noticed it. A sleek black phone, sitting precariously on the edge of the desk. Elena froze. In 6 months she had never, not once, seen Richard Hale without his phone. It was practically an extension of his hand, always buzzing with messages from people who believed their problems couldn't wait. He left his phone? She whispered to the empty room, the strangeness of it prickling along her spine. It felt wrong somehow, like seeing a lion without its teeth. Richard Hale was never separated from his phone. Everyone in the household knew that. His assistant Caroline once joked that he'd have it surgically attached if technology allowed. Elena carefully moved around it, wiping down the desk's surface with practiced efficiency. The phone sat there like a black hole, pulling at her attention despite her efforts to ignore it. What kind of emergency would make him forget the one thing he never left behind? She had almost finished the desk when it happened. The phone vibrated, lighting up with an incoming call. Elena jumped, nearly knocking over a crystal paperweight. The screen displayed no name, just a series of numbers. She turned away, continuing her work. It wasn't her business. The first rule of household staff: never answer the employer's personal calls. The phone fell silent. Elena exhaled, relieved. Then it started again, more insistent this time, buzzing angrily against the polished wood. Again she ignored it. By the third call in 5 minutes, Elena found herself staring at the device, a strange unease building in her chest. "This isn't normal," she murmured, glancing at her watch. 9:47 p.m. Mr. Hale wasn't due back until midnight at the earliest. The phone began vibrating again, the same number. 4 calls in a row. This wasn't a casual check-in. This was urgent. Elena wiped her suddenly damp palms on her uniform. What if something had happened to Mr. Hale? What if this was his security detail trying to reach him? What if someone was hurt? The phone continued its desperate plea. 5 rings, 6. Elena reached for it, then pulled her hand back. "This will get me fired," she whispered. But the persistence of the caller pushed against her caution. On the 7th ring, Elena answered. "Mr. Hale?" A male voice whispered immediately. tension vibrating through the connection. The voice was young, stressed, and slightly familiar, though Elena couldn't place it. She began, but the caller cut her off. "Thank God you answered. They're signing the documents now. If you don't stop them, the company's gone by morning." The words tumbled out in a frantic rush. "Blackridge and Sutton are moving everything offshore tonight. The projections they showed the board were fabricated. I just found the real numbers. They're gutting Hale Industries from the inside." Elena's breath caught in her throat. Blackridge. That was Thomas Blackridge, Mr. Hale's COO. She'd cleaned his office at Hale Industries headquarters last year before being assigned to the mansion permanently. The man who always left his coffee cups everywhere and treated the cleaning staff like they were invisible. "I'm not," she tried again. "The Singapore accounts are a shell," the voice continued, oblivious to her attempt to speak. "They're routing everything through dummy corporations. By the time anyone notices, it'll be too late. The merger documents have a hidden clause on page 237. It gives them controlling interest if certain performance metrics aren't met, and they've manipulated the data to ensure they won't be." Elena's mind raced. She should identify herself, explain that she wasn't Mr. Hale, but something in the caller's desperate tone stopped her. This wasn't office politics or a minor issue. This was the sound of a crisis unfolding in real time. "Who is this?" she finally managed to ask, her voice barely above a whisper. The line went silent for a beat. Then, "It's Keller. Who the hell is this? Where's Hale?" Alex Keller, the name clicked into place. The young finance director Mr. Hale had promoted last year. Elena had overheard Caroline talking about it, saying Mr. Hale saw something of himself in the ambitious young man. "Mr. Hale isn't here. He left his phone. Elena swallowed hard. "I'm the house staff." "Jesus Christ," Keller hissed. "The one time he forgets his damn phone. Look, where is he? Can you reach him?" "Emergency meeting downtown." "I don't know where exactly," Elena replied, her heart pounding. "I don't have his other contact information." "Downtown? That's..." Keller's voice broke off. "That's where they're having him sign the papers right now. He thinks he's authorizing a standard acquisition, but he's signing away his company. Blackridge must have orchestrated this whole thing. Get Hale there without his research team, without his usual safeguards." A cold certainty settled in Elena's stomach. Something terrible was happening, and she was the only one who knew. "What can I do?" she asked, surprising herself with the steadiness in her voice. "Nothing. There's nothing." Keller stopped abruptly. "Wait, his laptop. Hale always leaves his laptop in his study safe when he's out. If you can access it, I can send you the real projections and the evidence of what they're doing. Maybe there's a way to warn him." Elena looked at the painting behind the desk, an abstract that concealed a wall safe. She'd seen Mr. Hale open it once, not realizing she was still in the room, dusting the bookshelves in the corner. "Even if I could open the safe, I don't have his password," Elena said. "Biometrics," Keller replied quickly. "His laptop uses facial recognition, but the safe..." "I know the combination," Elena admitted quietly. "I saw him open it once. I never told anyone." The line went silent for a moment. Then Keller said, "I'm sending you evidence to that phone right now. Get the laptop. We have less than an hour before Hale Industries becomes nothing but an empty shell and Richard loses everything he's built." Elena ended the call, staring at the phone in her hand like it might bite her. What she was considering wasn't just crossing a line, it was leaping over it entirely. Accessing her employer's safe? Using his personal computer? She could be arrested, not just fired. But the alternative was standing by while people who already had everything stole from a man who, despite his distant manner, had always treated his staff with basic respect. Mr. Hale had personally authorized her grandmother's medical treatment last year, when Elena had hesitantly asked for an advance on her salary. He hadn't made a show of it, just nodded and had Caroline arrange everything. 3 months of treatment that Elena could never have afforded. The clock on the wall ticked loudly, counting down the seconds of her indecision. Elena set the phone down and walked to the painting. Her hands trembled slightly as she swung it open on its hidden hinges, revealing the safe behind it. She closed her eyes briefly, recalling the sequence she'd glimpsed months ago. Right 42, left 17, right 33, left 8. The safe clicked open. Inside sat a slim silver laptop, several folders of documents, and a small velvet box that Elena deliberately ignored. She removed only the laptop, closing the safe carefully and replacing the painting. Back at the desk, Elena opened the computer. The screen glowed to life, a facial recognition prompt appearing. She tilted it toward her face, fully expecting rejection. To her shock, the system unlocked immediately. "What the?" Elena murmured, staring at the desktop that was now visible. Then understanding dawned. The facial recognition had been calibrated months ago, when her hair was shorter. In the dim light of the study, with her current shoulder-length hair pulled back in a ponytail, she bore a passing resemblance to Caroline, Mr. Hale's assistant. The system had mistaken her for the person who occasionally accessed the laptop. The phone buzzed with incoming messages from Keller. Documents, spreadsheets, emails. Elena began opening them on the laptop, her cleaning forgotten as she immersed herself in financial data that was mostly beyond her understanding, but contained clear evidence of something deeply wrong. Projected profits had been artificially inflated. Assets were being systematically undervalued and transferred. Loans had been taken against Hale Industries holdings without proper board approval. And, most damning of all, emails between Blackridge and Lawrence Sutton of Sutton Global Planning, how they would divide the company once they'd stripped it of value. "My God," Elena whispered, scrolling through page after page of betrayal laid bare in corporate language and numbers. The phone rang again. "Keller, did you get everything?" he demanded without preamble. "Yes, but I don't understand all of it," Elena admitted. "How can we reach Mr. Hale? I've tried everything. His security detail isn't answering either." Keller's voice was tight with strain. "They're meeting at the Apex building downtown, 25th floor, but I can't get there in time. I'm at the Newark office reviewing these files." Elena glanced at the clock. 10:23 p.m. "I could go," she said, the words out before she fully processed them. "I could take this evidence to him." "You? No offense, but would they even let you in? That building has serious security, especially after hours." Elena thought quickly. "I have his phone, and..." She looked down at herself, at the standard uniform of Hale household staff. Black pants, crisp white shirt, black vest with a small but unmistakable Hale logo embroidered on the breast pocket. The same logo that appeared on Hale Industries buildings in letterhead. "I'm wearing a uniform that marks me as Hale staff." Silence stretched between them as Keller considered. "It might work," he finally said. "You'd need to convince security you're bringing urgent documents from his home office. Do you have any kind of ID badge?" "Yes," Elena confirmed. All household staff had security badges for access to Hale properties. They weren't the same as corporate badges, but they carried the same logo and security features. "If you do this..." Keller hesitated. "You understand the risk, right? Best case, you keep your job. Worst case..." "I know," Elena replied simply. She thought of her grandmother, of the medical bills that would have destroyed her family if not for Mr. Hale's quiet intervention, of the job that paid her enough to send money home every month and still save for nursing school. "I'll call you when I get there." Elena gathered the evidence, transferring key files to a USB drive she found in the desk drawer. She printed the most damning emails and spreadsheets on the small printer in the corner of the study, sliding everything into a leather portfolio also taken from the desk. She looked at herself in the reflection of the window, a cleaning maid about to walk into a high-stakes business meeting to expose a corporate conspiracy. It was absurd, impossible, and yet she was the only one who could do it. Elena straightened her vest, tucked her hair neatly behind her ears, and lifted her chin. For a moment, she hardly recognized herself, the determination in her eyes, the set of her jaw. This wasn't just about saving her employer's company. It was about right and wrong, about not standing by when you could make a difference. She picked up Mr. Hale's phone and the portfolio of evidence. The weight of both felt immense in her hands, the physical manifestation of a trust she had never been given, but was choosing to honor anyway. As she moved toward the door, a text message lit up the phone's screen. From Thomas Blackridge. "Everything proceeding as planned. Congratulations in advance, Richard. Tonight, we make history." Elena's resolve hardened. She squared her shoulders and walked out of the study, leaving her cleaning cart behind. The marble halls of the mansion no longer felt intimidating. They were just floors and walls, no more substantial than the paper contracts that threatened to destroy everything. The night air hit her face as she stepped outside, hailing a taxi at the corner. As the car pulled away from the curb, Elena looked back at the towering Hale mansion, wondering if she would ever set foot inside it again after tonight. "Apex building downtown," she told the driver, clutching the portfolio to her chest. "And please hurry, there's not much time." The taxi merged into the late-night traffic of Manhattan, carrying Elena toward a confrontation that would either end her career or save a billion-dollar empire. The city lights blurred past the window as she mentally prepared for what lay ahead. The security guards, the executives, the moment she would have to step out of invisibility and make herself heard. Whatever happened next, Elena knew one thing with absolute certainty. She was no longer just the maid who cleaned when no one was watching. Tonight, for better or worse, everyone would see her. The Apex building stood like a glass dagger against the New York City skyline, its sharp edges cutting into the night. Elena's taxi pulled to the curb beneath the towering structure, its illuminated floors stretching upward until they disappeared into low-hanging clouds. $25, the driver announced, glancing at Elena's uniform in the rearview mirror with mild curiosity. Elena handed him $30, the small act of generosity a talisman against what lay ahead. "Keep the change," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. The taxi pulled away, leaving Elena alone on the sidewalk, clutching Richard Hale's leather portfolio to her chest like armor. Through the revolving glass doors, she could see the security desk, her first obstacle. The building's lobby gleamed with marble and chrome, designed to intimidate visitors with its cold opulence. "You can do this," she whispered to herself, straightening her uniform vest. "For once in your life, Elena, make them see you." The security guard looked up as she approached, his expression professionally neutral. "Buildings closed to the public, ma'am." Elena summoned every ounce of confidence she could muster. "I'm from Mr. Hale's residence," she stated, displaying her staff ID badge. "I have urgent documents he requires for his meeting with Mr. Blackridge and Mr. Sutton." She placed Richard's phone on the counter, its screen displaying his distinctive wallpaper, the Hale Industries logo. "He left his phone at home and sent me to deliver these materials immediately." The guard studied her badge, then the phone, then Elena herself. 25th floor? Elena nodded, heart pounding so loudly she was certain he could hear it. He reached for his desk phone. "Let me just verify." "Sir?" Elena interrupted, lowering her voice conspiratorially. "Mr. Hale specifically said not to announce me. He wants these documents as a surprise element in the negotiations." She leaned forward slightly. "It's quite sensitive. Corporate matters." The guard hesitated, glancing between Elena and his phone. 6 months of invisibility had taught Elena one crucial truth. People rarely questioned the staff, especially staff who acted like they belonged exactly where they were. "Sign in," he finally said, sliding a digital tablet toward her. Elena signed with a confidence she didn't feel, accepting the temporary visitor badge he printed for her. "Elevator bank C for executive floors," he instructed, already looking past her to the next task. The elevator carried her upward at dizzying speed, numbers flashing on the digital display. 10, 15, 20, each floor bringing her closer to a confrontation she had no training for, no right to initiate. The portfolio seemed to grow heavier in her hands. Her phone, her actual phone, not Richard's, vibrated in her pocket. A text from Keller. "Are you there yet?" "In the elevator," she typed back. "What room?" "Conference room A, northeast corner. Security code 4173 wires if the door is locked." The elevator doors slid open on the 25th floor, revealing a hushed reception area lit only by subtle recessed lighting. No receptionist at this hour, just empty desks and the soft hum of climate control systems. Elena followed signs toward the northeast corner, her sensible shoes silent on the plush carpet. Through glass walls, she glimpsed empty offices, abandoned computer screens, forgotten coffee cups. The artifacts of corporate lives paused until morning. Except for one room glowing at the end of the corridor, voices drifted through the partially closed door, male, authoritative, celebratory. Elena slowed her approach, heart hammering against her ribs. "Most profitable quarter in Hale Industries history," came a voice she recognized as Thomas Blackridge's. "Once the Singapore expansion is complete." "Gentlemen, I think we've covered everything," Richard Hale's distinct baritone replied. "If there's nothing else." Elena took a deep breath and pushed open the door. 4 men in expensive suits turned toward her simultaneously, their expressions shifting from surprise to confusion to annoyance in rapid succession. Richard Hale sat at the head of a long conference table, a stack of documents before him, pen in hand. Thomas Blackridge and Lawrence Sutton flanked him like predators, while a 4th man, clearly a lawyer, stood nearby. "What is this?" Blackridge demanded, recovering first. "We're in a private meeting." Richard Hale's eyes narrowed as he recognized Elena. "Ms." He paused, clearly searching for her name. "Vasquez, sir. Elena Vasquez," she supplied, stepping fully into the room. "From your household staff." "I can see that," he replied coolly. Whatever this is, it can wait until morning. Elena swallowed hard. No, sir, it can't. She placed his phone on the table, sliding it toward him. You left this at home. There's something you need to see before you sign anything. The room went silent. Richard picked up his phone, glancing at the screen with genuine surprise, as if only now realizing it had been missing. How dare you interrupt a confidential business meeting? Blackridge hissed, moving toward Elena. Mr. Hale, I'll have security remove her. Wait. Richard held up his hand, studying Elena with newfound intensity. What exactly couldn't wait, Ms. Vasquez? Elena placed the portfolio on the table, opening it to reveal the printed documents. Her hands trembled slightly, but her voice remained firm. Evidence that the Singapore deal is fraudulent, sir. The projections presented to the board were falsified. The merger documents contain hidden clauses that would transfer controlling interest to Sutton Global. Lawrence Sutton laughed, the sound sharp and dismissive. This is absurd. Richard, your maid is delivering corporate espionage theories now? What's next, stock tips from your gardener? Richard ignored him, eyes fixed on Elena. How did you come by this information? Alex Keller called your phone repeatedly. When I answered, he explained what he'd discovered in Newark. The evidence is all here. She gestured to the portfolio. And on your laptop, she faltered, which I accessed from your safe. You broke into my safe? Richard's voice was dangerously quiet. Yes, sir, Elena admitted. I did. The tension in the room was palpable. Blackridge stepped forward, his face flushed with anger. This is preposterous. This woman should be arrested, not listened to. She's clearly working with Keller, who's been gunning for my position for months. Richard held up his hand again, silencing Blackridge. He began examining the documents Elena had brought, his expression unreadable as he flipped through pages of financial data and printed emails. These could be fabricated, Sutton suggested, though his confident demeanor had slipped slightly. Anyone could print fake documents. True, Richard conceded, setting down the papers. He picked up his phone, scrolling through the messages and files Keller had sent. Minutes stretched in tense silence as he read, his face gradually hardening into stone. Finally, Richard looked up, his gaze moving from Blackridge to Sutton. Is it true? He asked simply. Richard, you can't possibly believe, Blackridge began. The question, Richard cut him off, was not rhetorical. He turned to the lawyer, who had remained silent throughout the exchange. Mr. Daniels, would you please examine page 237 of the merger agreement? There should be a clause regarding performance metrics. The lawyer flipped through the thick document, finding the page in question. His expression changed as he read. Mr. Hale, this clause is concerning. It doesn't align with what we discussed. Richard nodded slowly, then turned back to Elena. Ms. Vasquez, would you please call Mr. Keller? Put him on speaker. Elena fumbled with her phone, dialing Keller with shaking fingers. The room fell silent as the call connected. Elena, are you there? Did you find him? Keller's voice filled the conference room. I'm here, Mr. Keller, Richard responded, along with Mr. Blackridge, Mr. Sutton, and apparently a great deal of evidence suggesting conspiracy and fraud. His voice was calm, but carried an undertone of tightly controlled fury. I'd like you to explain exactly what you found in Newark. As Keller detailed his discoveries, hidden accounts, falsified projections, emails outlining the planned dismantling of Hale Industries, Elena watched the color drain from Blackridge's face. Sutton maintained his composure better, but his eyes darted repeatedly toward the door. When Keller finished, Richard thanked him and ended the call. The silence that followed was deafening. Richard, Blackridge finally said, his voice conciliatory. This is clearly a misunderstanding. Save it, Thomas. Richard cut him off. Mr. Daniels, please call security. Then contact the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. He turned to Elena, his expression softening slightly. Ms. Vasquez, would you mind waiting outside? I need to have a private conversation with my soon-to-be former colleagues. Elena nodded, backing toward the door. As she stepped into the hallway, she heard Richard's voice, deadly quiet. Gentlemen, let's discuss exactly how this ends for you. The door closed behind her. Elena leaned against the wall, suddenly exhausted as adrenaline drained from her system. She'd done it. She'd actually done it. The realization left her lightheaded. Through the glass, she could see Richard Hale standing now, towering over the seated Blackridge and Sutton, his back straight, his finger jabbing the air to emphasize whatever he was saying. The two men seemed to have shrunk in their expensive suits. 10 minutes later, security officers arrived, entering the conference room without knocking. Elena watched as they escorted Blackridge and Sutton out, neither man looking in her direction as they passed. The lawyer followed, nodding politely to Elena before disappearing down the corridor toward the elevators. Only Richard remained in the conference room, gathering papers methodically, his movements precise and controlled. Elena waited, unsure if she should leave or stay until dismissed. The decision was made for her when Richard opened the door. "Ms. Vasquez," he said, gesturing for her to enter. "Please, come in." Elena stepped back into the conference room, standing awkwardly by the door as Richard returned to his seat at the head of the table. "Sir, she began. "You broke into my safe," he stated, cutting her off. "You accessed my private computer. You left your post without authorization." His voice was even, factual. Elena nodded, staring at the carpet. "Yes, sir. You also," he continued, "prevented a catastrophic fraud that would have destroyed my company and cost thousands of people their jobs." He paused, "Including yours." Elena looked up, meeting his gaze for perhaps the first time in 6 months of employment. His eyes were tired but clear, studying her with newfound curiosity. "What made you do it?" he asked. "You could have ignored the calls, left the phone where it was. None of this was your responsibility." Elena considered the question carefully. "My grandmother always told me that character is what you do when no one is watching," she finally said. "And sometimes what you don't do matters more than what you do." Richard nodded slowly, a hint of a smile touching his lips. "Your grandmother sounds like a wise woman." "She is," Elena agreed. "She's also alive because of the medical treatment you approved last year. I never thanked you properly for that." Recognition dawned in Richard's eyes. "I remember now. Caroline mentioned your situation." He leaned back in his chair. "I hadn't connected that, Elena, with you." The admission hung in the air between them, the invisible made visible at last. Richard stood, gathering his phone and the portfolio of evidence. "It's late. I'll have my driver take you home." "Thank you, sir," Elena replied, relieved that at least she hadn't been fired on the spot. As they walked toward the elevator together, Richard asked, "How did you know the safe combination?" Elena flushed. "I saw you open it once. I was dusting the bookshelves. You didn't notice me." He chuckled, surprising her. "It seems there's a lot I haven't noticed, Ms. Vasquez." The elevator arrived and they stepped in together. "I'll need to change that combination tomorrow." "Of course, sir." The elevator descended in silence. When it reached the lobby, Richard turned to her. "We'll talk more tomorrow. For now." He hesitated, seeming to choose his words carefully. "Thank you, Elena. Not many people would have done what you did tonight." She nodded, suddenly unable to speak past the lump in her throat. As they crossed the lobby, Elena realized something had fundamentally shifted. She was still the maid and he was still the billionaire. But for the first time they were walking side by side. Outside, Richard's driver held the car door open. "Take Ms. Vasquez home first," Richard instructed him. "Then return for me." As Elena settled into the leather seat, Richard leaned down to the window. "Ms. Vasquez, one more thing." "Sir?" A genuine smile crossed his face, transforming his usually stern features. "Do you always answer other people's phones?" Elena felt herself returning the smile. "Only when they won't stop ringing, Mr. Hale." He nodded, still smiling. "Good night, Ms. Vasquez." "Good night, sir." As the car pulled away from the curb, Elena watched Richard Hale through the rear window, standing tall before the Apex building. For the first time since she'd begun working for him, she wondered what it would be like to actually know the man, not just clean his home. Perhaps tomorrow she would find out. Sunlight streamed through Elena's apartment window, casting long rectangles of light across her worn carpet. She blinked awake, momentarily disoriented. The events of the previous night rushed back. The phone, the safe, the confrontation at the Apex building. Had that really happened? Had she actually done those things? Her uniform hung neatly on the bathroom door where she'd placed it after returning home at nearly 2 a.m. Real then. All of it. Elena reached for her phone, checking the time. 8:27 a.m. She'd slept through her alarm. Panic surged through her as she bolted upright. She was supposed to be at the mansion by 7 a.m. for the morning shift. 3 missed calls from an unknown number. 1 voicemail. Heart racing, Elena played the message, expecting termination or worse. "Ms. Vasquez, this is Caroline Palmer, Mr. Hale's executive assistant." The crisp, efficient voice was unmistakable. "In light of last night's events, Mr. Hale has requested your presence at Hale Industries headquarters today at 10:00 a.m. A car will pick you up at 9:30. Professional attire is advised. Please call me back to confirm." Elena sat frozen on the edge of her bed. Professional attire? Not her uniform. Was this a formal dismissal or something else entirely? She returned Caroline's call with trembling fingers. "Ms. Palmer's office," came the immediate answer. "This is Elena Vasquez returning Ms. Palmer's call," she said, struggling to keep her voice even. "Ah, Ms. Vasquez, can you confirm your availability for the 10 a.m. meeting?" "Yes, but..." Elena hesitated. "May I ask what this is regarding?" There was a pause. Then Caroline's voice softened slightly. "Mr. Hale didn't specify, but given what happened last night, I think it's safe to say your job is not in jeopardy. Quite the opposite, in fact." Relief washed over Elena. "Thank you. I'll be ready at 9:30. After hanging up, Elena surveyed her small apartment with fresh eyes. The tidy one-bedroom in Queens was nothing like the luxury of the Hale mansion, but it was hers. A sanctuary she'd created with careful budgeting and the occasional splurge on plants or books. Her closet offered limited professional attire options. Elena selected her one good suit, navy blue, purchased for interviews before she'd started at the Hale residence. It was simple but well-tailored, the most expensive clothing item she owned. At 9:28 a.m., her phone buzzed with a text. "Car waiting downstairs." The black sedan that waited at the curb was identical to the one that had driven her home last night. The driver, however, was different. Younger, less formal. "Good morning, Ms. Vasquez," he said, opening the rear door for her. "Mr. Hale is looking forward to your arrival." The drive into Manhattan passed in a blur of anxiety and speculation. What could Richard Hale possibly want from her now? The fraud had been exposed, the conspirators apprehended. Her usefulness had ended the moment she'd delivered the evidence. Hale Industries headquarters occupied 30 floors of a gleaming skyscraper in Midtown. Unlike the Apex building's cold minimalism, the Hale lobby bustled with life, employees hurrying across the marble floors, visitors checking in at security, baristas serving coffee from a sleek cafe in the corner. Elena approached the reception desk, acutely aware of how out of place she felt. "Elena Vasquez for Mr. Hale?" she said, her voice smaller than she intended. The receptionist checked her screen, then smiled. "Yes, Ms. Vasquez. You're expected on the 30th floor. Jerry will escort you." She gestured to a security officer standing nearby. The elevator ride to the executive floor was silent and swift. Jerry led her through a series of corridors to an imposing set of double doors marked Richard Hale, Chief Executive Officer. Caroline Palmer sat at a desk outside, exactly as Elena had imagined her, poised, immaculately dressed, radiating efficiency. She looked up as they approached, her expression warming with recognition. "Ms. Vasquez, thank you for coming." Caroline stood, extending her hand. "Mr. Hale is just finishing a call. Can I get you anything while you wait? Coffee? Water?" "Water would be nice, thank you," Elena replied, surprised by the courtesy. In the mansion, she was the one who served, not the one being served. Caroline gestured to a seating area nearby. "Please, make yourself comfortable. It shouldn't be long." Elena perched on the edge of a leather armchair, too nervous to relax. Through glass walls, she could see Richard Hale in his office, pacing as he spoke on the phone. He looked different here, more animated, more in his element than in the quiet formality of his home. The double doors opened exactly 5 minutes later. Richard stepped out, spotting Elena immediately. "Ms. Vasquez," he greeted her, his voice warmer than she'd ever heard it. "Please, come in." Elena followed him into an office larger than her entire apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Manhattan. The city spread below like a living map. One wall displayed framed photographs, Richard with various dignitaries at charity events, breaking ground at construction sites. Another held awards and recognitions. A massive desk dominated the space, but Richard led her instead to a sitting area with comfortable chairs arranged around a low table. "Thank you for coming," he said, gesturing for her to sit. "I imagine you're wondering why I asked you here." Elena nodded, finding her voice. "Yes, sir." Richard smiled slightly. "After last night, I think we can dispense with some formalities. Please call me Richard." Elena faltered. "That would take some getting used to." "Fair enough." He settled into the chair opposite her. "First, I want to assure you that your job at the residence is secure. What you did last night, breaking into my safe, accessing my computer, while technically grounds for termination, was done with the best intentions. More importantly, it saved my company." Elena exhaled slowly. "Thank you, sir. However," he continued, "I didn't ask you here to discuss your position as household staff." Caroline entered with Elena's water, setting it on the table before discreetly withdrawing. Richard leaned forward, hands clasped. Last night revealed something important to me, Ms. Vasquez. Not just about Blackridge and Sutton's betrayal, but about my own blindness. I failed to see what was happening in my company because I've surrounded myself with people who think exactly as I do. Harvard MBAs, lifelong finance professionals, people from my own socio-economic background. He gestured toward the window. Out there are thousands of Hale Industries employees whose perspectives I never hear. And right in my own home was someone with the intelligence and courage to do what my highly paid executives wouldn't: act decisively when something was wrong, regardless of personal risk. Elena shifted uncomfortably under his scrutiny. I only did what seemed right. Precisely. Richard nodded. And that's rare. Rarer than you might think. He reached for a folder on the table, opening it to reveal documents bearing the Hale Industries logo. Which brings me to my proposal. He slid the folder toward her. I'd like to offer you a new position. Special Assistant to the CEO for Ethics and Corporate Responsibility. You would report directly to me with 3 primary responsibilities. First, evaluating company practices from an outside perspective. Second, creating channels for employees at all levels to raise concerns without fear of retaliation. And third, helping me see what I'm missing. Elena stared at the offer letter, unable to process what she was hearing. The salary figure made her blink twice to ensure she wasn't misreading. This is, she began, then stopped, unsure how to continue. Unexpected? Richard supplied. For both of us. But sometimes the best decisions are. Elena looked up from the documents. With all due respect, sir, Richard, I don't have a business degree. I've never worked in corporate ethics. I'm studying to be a nurse, not an executive. And that's precisely why you're perfect for this role, he replied without hesitation. You brought a nurse's perspective to a business problem. You saw someone in distress and acted to help regardless of protocol. That's exactly what Hale Industries needs. He leaned back in his chair. Your lack of formal business education is an asset, not a liability. You won't be constrained by conventional wisdom or corporate groupthink. And as for qualifications, he smiled slightly. Breaking into your boss's safe to save his company demonstrates a rather unique skill set. Elena couldn't help but return the smile. When you put it that way. Take some time to consider it, Richard said, standing. The offer doesn't expire until next week. And regardless of your decision, your current position remains secure. Elena rose as well, clutching the folder to her chest much as she had clutched the portfolio of evidence the night before. Thank you for the opportunity. I'll think about it carefully. As she turned to leave, Richard added, Oh, and Miss Vasquez? Alex Keller has been asking about you. He seems quite impressed by your actions last night. I've taken the liberty of providing him your contact information. I hope that's acceptable. A blush warmed Elena's cheeks. Yes, that's fine. Excellent. Caroline will show you out. In the elevator descending to the lobby, Elena finally allowed herself to breathe normally. The folder in her hands represented a future she had never imagined possible, one that had materialized overnight because she'd answered a phone that wouldn't stop ringing. Her own phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number as she crossed the lobby. The maid who saved Hale Industries. I'm impressed. Coffee sometime. Alex Keller. Elena smiled, typing back, Only if you promise not to call me the maid again. His response came immediately. Deal. Tomorrow, 2 p.m., Evergreen Coffee on 53rd. See you there, she replied, stepping out into the sunlight. The city seemed different somehow, not because it had changed, but because she was seeing it through new eyes. The buildings weren't just structures she cleaned around. They were places where decisions were made, where lives and livelihoods hung in the balance. And now, improbably, she had been invited to one of those decision-making tables. The car waited to take her home, but Elena found herself reluctant to leave just yet. Actually, she told the driver, I think I'll walk for a while. She needed time to think, to process everything that had happened in the past 24 hours. Elena set off down the sidewalk, the folder tucked safely in her bag, her mind racing with possibilities. 3 blocks later, she passed a newsstand where the financial papers displayed headlines about turmoil at Hale Industries and CEO thwarts hostile takeover attempt. None mentioned a maid who had answered a forgotten phone. Elena smiled to herself, oddly pleased by her anonymity. Fame had never been her goal. Her phone rang, her grandmother calling from Arizona, right on schedule for their weekly check-in. Abuelita, Elena answered, switching to Spanish. I have the most incredible story to tell you. As she recounted the events of the past day, Elena realized something important. The most meaningful part of her story wasn't the corporate drama or the potential promotion. It was the moment she had chosen to act rather than remain invisible. The moment she had decided that doing the right thing mattered more than staying in her assigned place. "So what will you do?" her grandmother asked when Elena had finished. "Will you take this new job?" Elena paused at a crosswalk, watching the diverse crowd of New Yorkers flowing around her, each with their own story, their own invisible struggles and triumphs. "I don't know yet," she admitted. "It's a huge change. I'd have to put nursing school on hold." "Mija," her grandmother said gently, "sometimes life offers you a door you never expected. There is no wrong choice, only different paths." Elena smiled, crossing the street as the light changed. "When did you get so wise, abuelita?" "Around the same time you got so brave," came the affectionate reply. After hanging up, Elena continued walking, no particular destination in mind. The weight of the folder in her bag reminded her of the choice awaiting her decision. Special assistant to the CEO, a title that would transform her from invisible to influential overnight. Yet something about it troubled her. Not the responsibility or the dramatic change, but the suddenness. Richard Hale had seen her truly for the first time last night. Was that enough to justify such a leap of faith on either side? As Elena passed a small park, she spotted a bench in the shade and sat down. Opening the folder again, she read through the offer more carefully. The role was newly created, reporting structure clearly defined, salary generous but not outrageous. A 2-year initial contract with options for renewal or advancement. What struck her most was the final paragraph. "This position is designed to evolve based on the candidate's strengths and the company's needs. Ms. Vasquez will have significant latitude to shape the role's ultimate form and function." Elena closed the folder, watching pigeons gather at the feet of an elderly man tossing breadcrumbs nearby. The position would be what she made it, much like she had made something unexpected of her night cleaning shift. Her phone buzzed again with another text from Alex Keller. "Breaking news, Blackridge and Sutton formally arrested this morning. FBI found offshore accounts exactly where you pointed them. You're the hero of Hale Industries today, even if most people don't know it yet." Elena smiled, typing back, "Not a hero, just someone who answered a phone." "Sometimes," he replied. "That's all it takes to change everything." Looking up at the Hale Industries tower visible between buildings in the distance, Elena couldn't help but agree. A forgotten phone, an insistent caller, a choice to act rather than ignore. She stood, decision made. She would accept the position, not because it was prestigious or lucrative, but because it would allow her to keep doing what she had done last night. Notice what others missed, speak for those who weren't being heard, and act when something wasn't right. Elena began walking back toward the tower, ready to give Richard her answer in person. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she would face them the same way she had faced the crisis last night, with courage, integrity, and the quiet confidence that doing the right thing mattered, whether anyone was watching or not. Monday morning arrived with the nervous energy of first days. Elena stood before her bedroom mirror adjusting a silk blouse she'd purchased over the weekend. Emerald green, a bold choice she wouldn't have made a week ago. Her reflection showed someone both familiar and strange. The same Elena Vasquez who had spent 6 months cleaning in silence, now dressed for an executive floor. "Special assistant to the CEO for ethics and corporate responsibility," she murmured, testing how the words felt in her mouth. Still foreign, still improbable. Richard had been surprised, but pleased when she'd returned to his office on Friday to accept the position. "Monday then," he'd said simply. "Caroline will help you get settled." The car sent for her was now a regular arrangement, a luxury Elena wasn't sure she'd ever get used to. As the driver navigated through morning traffic, she scrolled through news articles about Hale Industries on her phone. The story had evolved from attempted corporate takeover to massive fraud scheme, with Blackridge and Sutton's names dragged through financial publications worldwide. Neither had made bail. None of the articles mentioned her. Richard had kept her involvement private, for which Elena was grateful. Her sudden promotion would raise enough eyebrows without the added scrutiny of being the maid who saved Hale Industries. The lobby felt different this time, less intimidating, though no less grand. The security guard recognized her, smiling as he prepared her permanent badge. "Ms. Vasquez," he said, handing over the credentials. "Welcome to the team." The 30th floor buzzed with Monday morning activity when Elena emerged from the elevator. Caroline spotted her immediately, rising from her desk with a warm smile. "Right on time," she said, extending her hand. Let me show you to your office. Office. The word alone was surreal. Elena followed Caroline down a corridor adjacent to Richard's suite. Mr. Hale wanted you nearby, Caroline explained, stopping at a door with a temporary nameplate, E. Vasquez. The space beyond was modest by executive standards but stunning to Elena. Corner office with 2 windows, a sleek desk, comfortable visitor chairs, and empty bookshelves waiting to be filled. A laptop sat ready, alongside a welcome basket containing office supplies, company-branded items, and a handwritten note she couldn't read from this distance. "This is," Elena trailed off, overwhelmed. "Yours," Caroline finished for her. "Coffee machine is there, bathroom down the hall, and my desk is your first stop for anything you need." She checked her watch. "Mr. Hale has his Monday executive briefing until 10:30. Then he'd like to meet with you. In the meantime, HR needs you to complete some paperwork." The next 2 hours passed in a flurry of signatures, system setups, and orientation. By the time Caroline called to say Richard was ready, Elena had signed more documents than she could count and memorized the locations of the cafeteria, HR department, and nearest exits. Richard stood when she entered his office, gesturing toward the same sitting area where they'd met on Friday. This time, they weren't alone. Alex Keller sat in one of the chairs, rising as Elena approached. In person, he was younger than she'd expected. Early 30s perhaps, with kind eyes behind stylish glasses and a smile that appeared genuine. Their coffee date on Saturday had been rescheduled due to an emergency at the Newark office. "Ms. Vasquez," Alex extended his hand. "Finally, we meet properly." "Mr. Keller," she replied, shaking his offered hand. The voice on the phone. "Please, sit," Richard said, taking his own seat. "I've asked Alex to join us because he'll be working closely with you on the Singapore situation. His financial forensics skills are unmatched, and he's already familiar with what we're dealing with." Elena nodded, settling into her chair with what she hoped appeared like confidence. "Now," Richard continued, "your first assignment." He slid a folder across the table. "I need you to help me understand how this happened. Not just the technical aspects of the fraud, which Alex is handling, but the human elements. How did Blackridge and Sutton convince so many people to either participate or look the other way? Who knew what and when? What cultural factors within Hale Industries enabled this betrayal?" Elena opened the folder, finding organizational charts, meeting minutes, and internal communications. "You want me to investigate your own company culture?" Richard nodded. "Exactly. You're uniquely positioned for this. You know Hale Industries from both the inside and outside perspectives. The household staff sees things executives never do. You understand how organizations function at multiple levels." Elena absorbed this, processing the immensity of the task. People may not be willing to speak freely, especially to someone they see as newly appointed by the CEO. "That's why your title includes ethics," Richard replied. "You're not just my assistant, you're an independent voice for ethical concerns. Make it clear you're not reporting names, you're identifying patterns. The goal isn't to punish individuals, but to prevent this from happening again." Alex leaned forward. "I can share what I'm finding in the financial records: unusual approval patterns, circumvented controls, document timestamps that don't make sense. That might help guide your conversations." "Thank you," Elena said, already forming a mental approach. "I'll need to talk to people at different levels, not just executives." "You have full access," Richard assured her. "From maintenance staff to board members. No one is off limits." The meeting continued for another hour, establishing parameters and expectations. By the end, Elena had a clearer picture of her role. Part investigator, part advisor, part advocate. It was overwhelming but also exhilarating. As they wrapped up, Richard was called away for an urgent call. Alex lingered, helping Elena gather the materials. "So," he said casually, "how does it feel going from cleaning the CEO's office to having one of your own?" Elena appreciated his directness. "Surreal," she admitted. "Part of me is waiting for someone to realize there's been a mistake." Alex smiled. "No mistake. What you did took more courage and integrity than most people show in a lifetime." Richard Hale recognizes talent when he sees it, even if it took him 6 months to notice. "And you?" Elena asked. "What do you see?" "Someone who doesn't yet realize how remarkable she is," he replied without hesitation, "and who still owes me a coffee date." Elena felt warmth rise in her cheeks. "Tomorrow at 2 hours. I haven't forgotten. I'll hold you to it." Alex checked his watch. "I should get back to Newark. The forensic accountants are waiting." He handed her his business card. "My direct line. Call any time, work-related or otherwise." After he left, Elena returned to her new office, closing the door to process everything. The handwritten note in her welcome basket was from Richard. "Trust your instincts. They've proven excellent so far." She spent the afternoon familiarizing herself with the materials, creating a preliminary investigation plan, and figuring out the phone system. By 5 o'clock, fatigue was setting in. Not physical exhaustion like after a cleaning shift, but a different kind of tiredness from constant mental engagement and the emotional strain of stepping into a new identity. As employees began leaving for the day, Elena found herself drawn to the window. 30 floors below, Manhattan continued its relentless pace, unaware of the personal transformations happening in the glass tower above. Somewhere down there, cleaning crews were preparing to begin their evening shifts, invisible workers maintaining the infrastructures of power. A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. Caroline stood in the doorway, coat over her arm. "Heading out for the day," she said. "Do you need anything before I go?" Elena shook her head. "I'm fine, thank you." Caroline hesitated. "It's none of my business, but some advice. Don't stay too late your first day. The work will still be there tomorrow." Elena smiled gratefully. "Is it that obvious I'm not sure when to leave? Let's just say I've onboarded many executives," Caroline replied with a knowing look. "The good ones always worry about proving themselves right away." After Caroline left, Elena decided to take her advice. She gathered her things, shut down her computer, and took one last look at her office, before turning off the lights. In the elevator, she found herself alone with a maintenance worker beginning his evening shift. He wore the same uniform she had worn just days ago, avoiding eye contact in that practiced way of someone trained to be invisible. "Good evening," Elena said gently. He looked up, surprise flickering across his face at being acknowledged. "Evening, ma'am." As they descended, Elena made a decision. When she began her investigation tomorrow, this was where she would start. With the people whose perspectives were most overlooked, whose observations might contain the truths no one else had bothered to see. Outside, the early evening air carried a hint of approaching autumn. Elena declined the waiting car, choosing instead to walk a few blocks, needing time to decompress. Her phone buzzed with a text from her grandmother. "How was your first day, CEO's special assistant?" Elena smiled, typing back. "Overwhelming, but good. Still feels unreal. Remember," came the swift reply, "new shoes hurt until you break them in. Your new life will feel the same way for a while." As if on cue, Elena's actual new shoes, professional heels instead of comfortable cleaning sneakers, pinched her feet as she walked. Her grandmother's wisdom, as always, was perfectly timed. Near Bryant Park, Elena spotted a familiar figure sitting alone at an outdoor cafe. Alex Keller, jacket discarded in the warm evening, tie loosened, reviewing documents while nursing a coffee. He hadn't noticed her. For a moment, Elena considered approaching him, then decided against it. Tomorrow's coffee date would come soon enough. Tonight belonged to reflection, to processing the seismic shift her life had undergone. She continued walking, allowing herself to feel the full weight of the transition, from invisible to essential, from background to foreground, from following instructions to setting direction. The city lights began flickering on as dusk descended, illuminating the path ahead. Elena Vasquez, special assistant to the CEO, walked confidently forward into her new beginning, carrying with her the values and perspectives of the maid who had answered a forgotten phone and changed everything. Back in her apartment that evening, Elena removed her professional clothes, hanging them carefully for tomorrow. She sat at her small kitchen table with a cup of tea, opening her laptop to review her notes from the day. Her regular weekly cleaning shift would have started an hour ago at the Hale mansion. Someone else was there now, dusting the bookshelves in the study, polishing the banister, emptying wastebaskets. Someone else was invisible, working in silence while the wealthy residents came and went. The realization brought a complex mixture of emotions: gratitude for her extraordinary opportunity, pride in her courage, but also a tinge of survivor's guilt. Why her? Why now? How many other invisible workers had valuable insights that would never be heard? These questions solidified her resolve. Her new position wasn't just about preventing corporate fraud or advising the CEO. It was about creating channels for overlooked voices, ensuring that good ideas weren't missed because of who proposed them. Elena opened a new document and began typing, outlining a more comprehensive approach to her assignment. By midnight, she had created not just an investigation plan, but the framework for an ongoing ethics and feedback system that could outlast her 2-year contract. Tomorrow would be another day of firsts. First substantive work product, first investigative interviews, first coffee with Alex Keller. She was still Elena Vasquez, still the person who had cleaned silently for 6 months. But she was also becoming someone new, someone whose voice carried weight, whose observations mattered openly rather than secretly. As she finally prepared for bed, Elena remembered something her grandmother often said. Opportunities don't arrive dressed as we expect. A forgotten phone, an insistent caller, a split-second decision to answer instead of ignore. These ordinary moments had created an extraordinary opportunity. Whatever came next, success or failure, acceptance or resistance, Elena was ready to face it with the same courage that had led her to pick up Richard Hale's phone on that fateful night. Tomorrow would be day 2 of her new beginning, and this time, she would walk in, knowing she belonged. 3 weeks into her new role, Elena's office had transformed from pristine emptiness to organized productivity. Whiteboards covered with flowcharts and timelines dominated one wall. Bookshelves now held corporate governance manuals, ethics textbooks ordered online, and binders of interview notes. Her desk supported 2 computer monitors displaying spreadsheets and communication logs. Elena studied the central timeline she'd constructed, adding a yellow sticky note to a crucial point in March when Blackridge had first approached Sutton Global. The investigation was revealing a conspiracy more extensive than anyone had initially suspected, not just 2 corrupt executives, but a network of complicity extending through middle management and beyond. A soft knock interrupted her concentration. Richard stood in the doorway, coffee cup in hand. "Got a minute?" "Of course," Elena replied, gesturing to the visitor's chair. Instead, Richard walked to the timeline wall examining her work. "Impressive," he said, tapping the March notation. "How did you discover this initial contact?" "The official records show their first meeting in May." "Maintenance logs," Elena explained. Blackridge requested after-hours HVAC for a small gathering in Conference Room C. The building security sign-in shows Sutton arrived at 8:17 p.m., but doesn't show him leaving until 1:34 a.m. No official meeting was ever calendared. Richard shook his head, impressed. "And you found this by?" "Talking to the night maintenance supervisor," Elena said. He remembered because Sutton left a monogrammed pen behind, and he tried to return it the next day but was brushed off. "Small details," Richard mused. "Always the small details. Small people notice small details," Elena replied. "When you're expected to be invisible, you see everything." Richard nodded thoughtfully. "That's why I'm here, actually. The board meets tomorrow. They want a preliminary report on how this happened and what we're doing to prevent recurrence." Elena gestured to her organized chaos. "I'm not sure this is ready for board presentation." "It doesn't need to be perfect," Richard assured her. "Just honest, they need to understand the cultural factors that allowed this to flourish." He paused. "I'd like you to present personally." Elena stilled. "Me? To the board?" "Yes. Your perspective is unique. They should hear it directly." The request hung in the air between them. Not a suggestion, not quite an order. A vote of confidence that terrified and honored her simultaneously. "I'll prepare something appropriate," Elena finally agreed. After Richard left, Elena sank into her chair, heart racing. The board of directors, 12 titans of industry, finance, and law, would be judging not just her findings but her worthiness to present them, her legitimacy in a role she'd held for barely 3 weeks. Her phone buzzed with a text from Alex. "Lunch today? Discovered something interesting in the Singapore bank records." Their coffee date had evolved into regular working lunches and late-night phone calls discussing case developments. Professional collaboration with undercurrents of something more, territory neither had explicitly acknowledged. "Can't today," she texted back. "Board presentation tomorrow." "Rain check?" His response came quickly. "Board? That's huge. Need help prepping?" Elena smiled. "Might take you up on that. Dinner? My place 7:00. I'll cook." Elena returned to her timeline, examining the intricate web of events from a new perspective. What would the board need to understand? What could she uniquely contribute to their understanding? By late afternoon, she had drafted an outline and prepared key visual aids. At 6:30, she packed her materials and headed out, stopping by Richard's office to update him. "He's gone for the day," Caroline informed her. "Dinner with the Japanese investors. Can I help?" "Just wanted to let him know I'm working on the board presentation tonight," Elena said. "It should be ready by morning." Caroline nodded, then hesitated. "The board can be challenging, especially to new faces, particularly female ones without traditional credentials. Elena appreciated the warning. Any specific advice? Be direct. Don't apologize for your findings or your methods, and wear something powerful. Caroline smiled. The old guard responds to visual cues whether they admit it or not. Thank you, Elena replied sincerely. I'll remember that. Alex lived in a modern high-rise in Tribeca. Not as luxurious as Richard's mansion, but far more upscale than Elena's Queen's apartment. When she arrived, delicious aromas greeted her before he did. Hope you like paella, he said, ushering her inside. Family recipe. His apartment reflected his personality. Organized but not sterile. Comfortable without being casual. Bookshelves lined with economic theory texts and thriller novels. A piano in one corner. Large windows showcasing the city lights. Impressive, Elena commented, setting her work materials on his dining table. The view, the apartment. The cooking smells amazing. Alex smiled, returning to the kitchen. Newark office has its perks. Lower rent, shorter commute, actual work-life balance. When Richard offered to move me to headquarters after the Black Ridge incident, I declined. He stirred the paella. 7 more minutes. Wine. They settled into a comfortable rhythm, discussing the case while Alex finished cooking, then eating at his dining table surrounded by Elena's presentation materials. His insights on the financial aspects complemented her cultural analysis. The most disturbing finding, Elena explained between bites of exceptional paella, isn't that people actively participated. It's how many suspected something was wrong but stayed silent. Alex nodded. Fear culture. Exactly. In my interviews with mid-level managers, I kept hearing variations of, "It wasn't my place to question," or "I assumed someone higher up had approved it." Diffusion of responsibility, Alex offered. Classic organizational psychology problem. Elena adjusted one of her slides. And exacerbated by status differences. The cleaning staff noticed irregular meetings and document shredding but had no reporting mechanism. The finance team saw concerning numbers, but feared being labeled troublemakers. So what's your recommendation? Alex asked, refilling their wine glasses. Elena tapped her conclusion slide. 3-tiered approach. First, structural changes, anonymous reporting channels, protection for whistleblowers, regular ethics audits. Second, procedural changes, requiring multiple approvals for large transactions, rotating financial oversight teams. Third, and most challenging, cultural transformation. That's the one the board will push back on, Alex warned. Cultural change is expensive and slow. And essential, Elena countered. Without it, we're just creating new rules for clever people to work around. They moved to his living room couches after dinner, continuing to refine her presentation. As the evening progressed, their discussion shifted from professional to personal. Why finance? Elena asked during a break. You seem to have a strong ethical compass. That's not the stereotype of financial analysts. Alex laughed. I wanted to understand how money works, how it shapes decisions, institutions' lives. My parents lost everything in the 2008 crisis. I thought if I understood the system, I could help prevent that happening to others. And now you're uncovering financial fraud, Elena observed. Full circle. What about you? He asked. Cleaning jobs to nursing school was the plan, right? Did you ever imagine corporate ethics? Elena shook her head. Never. But nursing and this role share something fundamental. Both require noticing details others miss and speaking up when something's wrong. Alex studied her face. You're good at this, you know. Really good. The board will see that tomorrow. I hope so, Elena replied. I still feel like an imposter sometimes. We all do, Alex admitted. Even Richard, though he'd never say it. Their eyes met, conversation pausing. Alex leaned slightly forward, the moment suspended between professional collaboration and personal connection. Elena's phone shattered the silence. Richard calling. She answered immediately. Elena, something's come up, Richard said without preamble. How complete is your investigation timeline? Nearly finished, she replied. What's happening? The SEC just called. They're expanding their investigation to include our Asia-Pacific operations. Someone tipped them off about potential regulatory violations beyond what we've uncovered. Elena straightened. That doesn't make sense. The Singapore accounts were fabricated. They never actually contained Hale Industries funds. Exactly. Richard's voice was tense. Which means there's something else we're missing. Can you come to the office? Now? Elena glanced at Alex, who was watching with concern. "I'll be there in 30 minutes, she told Richard. After ending the call, she explained the situation. "I should come too," Alex said immediately. "I know those Singapore records better than anyone." They gathered her materials and headed out, taking a taxi to Hale headquarters. The building was mostly dark at 10:30 p.m., only security lights and occasional office illumination breaking the gloom. Richard waited in the executive conference room surrounded by open folders and a projected spreadsheet. His tie was loosened, sleeves rolled up, the look of a CEO in crisis management mode. "Thank you for coming," he said as they entered. "Alex, I didn't expect you, but I'm glad you're here." "What exactly did the SEC say?" Elena asked, setting down her materials. Richard grimaced. "They've received documentation suggesting Hale Industries has been using Singapore-based shell companies for off-books transactions since 2019, predating Blackridge's involvement with Sutton." "That's impossible," Alex interjected. "I've been through those records repeatedly." "The SEC seems convinced," Richard replied. "They've scheduled a formal interview for next week." Elena studied Richard's face, the tension in his jaw, the concern in his eyes. "You think it's legitimate," she realized. "You think there's something we haven't found?" Richard sighed heavily. "I think Blackridge may have been operating longer and more extensively than we realized. And I think our board presentation just became significantly more complicated." The three worked late into the night, Elena and Alex revising their findings based on this new information, Richard making calls to legal counsel, and preparing for the expanded investigation. By 3 a.m., they had constructed a new timeline that incorporated the SEC allegations, hypothetical connections between established facts and troubling possibilities. "Get some sleep," Richard finally told them. "The board meeting isn't until 2 p.m. We'll reconvene at noon to finalize our approach." In the lobby, Alex hailed a taxi for Elena. "You okay?" he asked, concern evident in his tired eyes. Elena nodded, though exhaustion pulled at her. "Just processing. If there's been a longer conspiracy, then we've only found part of the problem." Alex finished her thought. "I know. We'll figure it out." The taxi arrived. As Elena moved to enter, Alex gently touched her arm. "Elena, about earlier at my apartment." "We should focus on the case," she interrupted softly. "At least until after tomorrow." He nodded, understanding. "Get some rest." Elena slept only 3 hours before waking to refine her presentation. By noon, she was back at Hale headquarters dressed in her most professional outfit, a charcoal suit with subtle pinstripes, emerald blouse providing the only color. Richard and Alex were already in the conference room, reviewing the latest developments with the legal team. The atmosphere was tense but focused. "SEC documents arrived this morning," Richard informed her. "Their allegations center on a series of technology licensing agreements in Malaysia and Singapore, dating back to 2018. Before Blackridge was COO, Elena noted, mentally adjusting her timeline. "But not before he was VP of International Operations," Alex added. "This could have been his project from the beginning." At 1:45, Richard led them to the boardroom, an imposing space with a massive oval table and views of Manhattan that made even the executive floors seem modest by comparison. Portraits of former chairmen lined one wall, their stern expressions watching over proceedings like disapproving ancestors. Board members began arriving, distinguished men and women in expensive suits, carrying leather portfolios and decades of corporate experience. Elena recognized some from business publications and company events she'd worked as staff. At precisely 2 p.m., the chairman called the meeting to order, introducing Richard for opening remarks. Elena listened attentively, reviewing her notes one final time as Richard provided context about the investigation. "Rather than present my interpretation of the findings," Richard concluded, "I've asked Elena Vasquez, our Special Assistant for Ethics and Corporate Responsibility, to share her analysis directly. Ms. Vasquez brings a unique perspective that has proven invaluable in understanding how this situation developed." All eyes turned to Elena as she stood. The weight of those gazes, questioning, evaluating, skeptical, pressed against her confidence. She remembered Caroline's advice. "Be direct. Don't apologize." "Good afternoon," she began, voice steadier than she felt. 3 weeks ago, I was cleaning Mr. Hale's home office when I uncovered evidence of fraud that threatened to destroy this company. Today, I'll explain how that fraud was possible, why it wasn't detected sooner, and what must change to prevent similar threats in the future. The board members' expressions shifted from polite attention to genuine interest. Elena continued, presenting her findings methodically. The timeline, the interviews, the cultural patterns that had enabled the conspiracy. The most significant vulnerability wasn't in our financial controls, she explained, displaying a key slide. It was in our company culture, a culture where status determined whose concerns were heard, where questioning authority was discouraged, and where ethical considerations were treated as separate from business decisions rather than integral to them. As she spoke, Elena felt the room's energy change. Some board members leaned forward, engaged. Others shifted uncomfortably, perhaps recognizing their own role in shaping the problematic culture. And now, Elena continued, transitioning to the most difficult part, we face new allegations suggesting this problem extends beyond what we've uncovered so far. This isn't just about Blackridge and Sutton. It's about systems that allowed their behavior to flourish undetected for years. She outlined the SEC concerns, connecting them to her cultural analysis. When she finished 30 minutes later, the boardroom remained silent for several seconds before erupting into questions. For the next hour, Elena fielded inquiries, some supportive, others challenging, all probing. She answered with confidence born of thorough research and genuine conviction, never apologizing for her findings or her background. Ms. Vasquez, one board member finally asked, given your unique perspective, what do you believe is the single most important change Hale Industries must make? Elena considered the question carefully. Transparency, she answered, at every level, not just in financial reporting but in decision-making processes, in communication channels and how we value different voices within the organization. That's quite idealistic, another board member commented. Practical implementation would be challenging. Yes, Elena agreed. Cultural transformation is always challenging, but the alternative, continuing with systems that allowed this fraud to occur, would be far more costly in the long run. As the meeting concluded, Richard thanked Elena publicly, his approval evident. The chairman requested written copies of her findings for further review, and several board members approached with follow-up questions. When the boardroom finally emptied, only Elena, Richard, and Alex remained. Elena exhaled deeply, the tension of the presentation releasing all at once. That, Richard said simply, was extraordinary. Alex nodded in agreement. You had them, even the skeptics. The real work starts now, Elena reminded them. The SEC investigation, the cultural changes, rebuilding trust, that's all still ahead. Yes, Richard acknowledged. But today was a crucial first step. He checked his watch. I have calls to make regarding the SEC matter. We'll reconvene tomorrow morning to plan our approach. After Richard left, Alex turned to Elena. Dinner tonight? To celebrate? Elena smiled tiredly. Rain check? I need time to process everything. Of course, he agreed. But Elena, he paused, holding her gaze. What you did in there today, that wasn't just good, that was transformative. Back in her office, Elena gathered her materials, replaying the board meeting in her mind. She had been seen, truly seen, not as the former maid who got lucky, but as a perceptive analyst with valuable insights. As she left the building, Elena realized something important. Her power didn't come from her new title, or Richard's support, or even her investigation findings. It came from the perspective she'd developed during those months of invisibility, watching, listening, understanding the systems that others took for granted. The phone call that had changed her life 3 weeks ago hadn't really created something new. It had simply revealed what was already there, her courage, her integrity, her ability to see beneath the surface of things. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, the expanding SEC investigation, the implementation of her recommendations, the evolving relationship with Alex, the ongoing transformation of Hale Industries' culture. But tonight, walking through Manhattan as dusk settled over the city, Elena Vasquez allowed herself a moment of quiet pride. She had spoken truth to power, and power had listened. The invisible had become undeniably visible, and that, she knew, was just the beginning. 6 months after answering Richard Hale's forgotten phone, Elena stood at the window of her office watching rain streak across the glass. The Manhattan skyline blurred behind the downpour, buildings reduced to hazy silhouettes against a gray October sky. On her desk sat the final report, 200 pages documenting the most extensive corporate fraud investigation in Hale Industries' history. Tomorrow, she would present its conclusions to a special joint session of the board and executive leadership team. The investigation had expanded far beyond Blackridge and Sutton, uncovering a complex web of financial manipulation dating back nearly 5 years. 12 employees had been terminated. 3 more, including a senior vice president, faced criminal charges. The SEC investigation had resulted in a substantial settlement, but the company had avoided the worst potential consequences through Elena's comprehensive cooperation strategy. A soft knock interrupted her contemplation. Alex entered, carrying 2 coffee cups and a folder tucked under his arm. "Thought you might need this," he said, placing 1 cup on her desk. "You've been staring out that window for 20 minutes. Elena smiled, accepting the coffee gratefully. "Just thinking about how much has changed." "Having second thoughts about tomorrow?" Alex asked, settling into the chair across from her desk. "Not second thoughts," Elena clarified. "More like perspective thoughts. 6 months ago, I was cleaning Richard's study. Tomorrow, I'm presenting findings that will reshape the entire company." Their relationship had evolved alongside the investigation, professional collaboration deepening into friendship, then cautiously blossoming into something more. They'd taken things slowly, both aware of the complications their working relationship could create, both careful to maintain boundaries between personal and professional. Alex placed the folder on her desk. Final SEC clearance came through. "We're officially released from the mandatory oversight period." Elena flipped through the documents, the bureaucratic confirmation that Hale Industries had satisfied all regulatory requirements imposed after the scandal broke. "One chapter closes," she murmured. "And another begins." Alex completed her thought. "Have you decided yet? About Richard's offer?" The question had been looming for weeks. With the investigation concluding, Richard had proposed a permanent position, Chief Ethics Officer, reporting directly to the board, with expanded authority and resources. "I'm still thinking," Elena admitted. "It's an incredible opportunity, but you're wondering if it's really your path," Alex finished. His ability to articulate her unspoken thoughts was both comforting and occasionally unnerving. Elena nodded. "I started this job to help uncover one specific fraud. Now it's becoming a career, a life direction I never anticipated." "For what it's worth," Alex said carefully, "you're extraordinary at it. The changes you've implemented in 6 months, the anonymous reporting system, the cross-functional ethics committees, the mandatory leadership training, they're already making a difference." Elena sipped her coffee, considering his words. The structural reforms had indeed progressed faster than she'd anticipated, with surprising support from unexpected quarters. Even the most skeptical board members had become advocates after seeing early results. "What about your nursing ambitions?" Alex asked gently. "That's part of what I'm weighing," Elena acknowledged. "I've always wanted to help people directly, make tangible differences in individual lives. And you don't feel you're doing that here?" Elena turned back to the window, watching raindrops race down the glass. "Sometimes I do. When an employee uses the reporting system to flag a problem, when a manager thanks me for training that helped them handle a difficult situation." She paused. "Other times it feels abstract. Policy changes and governance structures impact people eventually, but not always in ways I can see." Alex was silent for a moment, respecting her reflection. "Whatever you decide," he finally said, "I support it. Completely." The unspoken question hung between them. How her decision might affect them, their evolving relationship, the future they had begun cautiously envisioning together. "Thank you," Elena replied, turning back to face him. "That means more than you know." Their moment was interrupted by Caroline's voice over the intercom. "Ms. Vasquez, Mr. Hale would like to see you when you have a moment." "I'll be right there," Elena responded. To Alex, she added, "Probably wants to review tomorrow's presentation again." "Go ahead," Alex said, standing. "I'll finalize the appendices for the report." "Dinner later?" Elena nodded. "My place? I'll cook this time." "Deal," he smiled. "Good luck with Richard." Richard's office had changed subtly over the past months. Family photos now mingled with the corporate awards. Comfortable seating areas had replaced some of the more imposing furniture. The overall atmosphere more welcoming, while no less impressive. The man himself had changed too. The crisis had forced a re-evaluation of his leadership style, his priorities, his relationship with the company he had built. Elena had watched him evolve from a distant authority figure to a more engaged, reflective leader. "Elena," he greeted her, rising from his desk. "Thank you for coming, please sit." Rather than the formal seating area, he gestured to a small table near the window where 2 cups of tea waited. This had become their custom for important conversations. Tea rather than coffee, equals rather than supervisor and subordinate. "Tomorrow's presentation is ready," Elena began as they settled at the table. "All the appendices will be finalized by end of day." "Good." But that's not why I asked you here, Richard replied, surprising her. I wanted to talk about something else entirely. He opened a drawer in the table, removing a familiar black phone, the same device that had started everything 6 months ago. I found this in my desk, he explained. I haven't used it since that night. Got a new one the next day, but I kept it as a reminder. Elena stared at the phone, memories flooding back, the insistent ringing, her moment of decision, the cascade of events that followed. A reminder of what? She asked softly. Of how easy it is to miss what's important, Richard said, turning the phone in his hands. I spent years building this company, focusing on strategy and growth, seeing only what I expected to see. Meanwhile, the most valuable insights were coming from places and people I never thought to look. He set the phone on the table between them. I know I've asked you to consider the chief ethics officer position. Before you give me your answer, I want to make sure you understand something. Elena waited, curious. Whatever you decide, Richard continued, your impact on Hale Industries is already permanent. The cultural transformation you've initiated will continue. The systems you've built will remain. You've changed how this company sees itself, how I see myself as its leader. The sincerity in his voice touched her deeply. Thank you, Elena said simply. That means a great deal to me. Have you made your decision? Richard asked. Not yet, Elena admitted. I'm still weighing options. Richard nodded, understanding. Take the time you need. The position will remain open until you decide. He paused, then added, though I hope you'll stay. I'll support whatever path you choose. The conversation shifted to tomorrow's presentation, but the phone remained on the table between them, a silent reminder of how a single moment could change everything. Later that evening, Elena's apartment filled with the aromas of her grandmother's recipes, comfort food from her childhood that she rarely took time to prepare. Alex was due in half an hour, and the cooking had provided a welcome distraction from the weight of decisions awaiting her. As she stirred the simmering pot of her abuela's famous pozole, Elena's phone rang. The screen displayed her grandmother's name and face. Abuelita, she answered warmly, switching to Spanish. I was just thinking about you. I'm making your pozole. You must be expecting company, her grandmother replied knowingly. You only make pozole for special occasions. Elena smiled. Alex is coming for dinner. Ah, the young man from the photos. He has kind eyes. Her grandmother's approval was evident even across the miles. How are you, Mija? You sound tired. Just a big presentation tomorrow, Elena explained, and some decisions to make. About the new position? Her grandmother had always possessed an uncanny ability to intuit Elena's thoughts. Yes, and other things too. What does your heart tell you? The older woman asked simply. Elena sighed. That's the problem. My heart is saying different things on different days. Then perhaps the decision isn't ripe yet, her grandmother suggested. Some fruits need more time on the vine. The wisdom resonated with Elena. Maybe you're right. Tell me something good that happened this week, her grandmother requested, changing the subject. Something that made you smile. Elena thought for a moment. We implemented the new ethics reporting system company-wide. The day after it went live, a warehouse worker in our Detroit facility used it to report unsafe storage practices for hazardous materials. Her manager had been ignoring her concerns for months. Now they're fixing the problem, and she's been recognized for preventing what could have been a serious accident. And how did that make you feel? Her grandmother probed gently. Like I'd made a real difference, Elena admitted. Like I'd given voice to someone who wasn't being heard. Her grandmother hummed thoughtfully. Sounds familiar. The parallel wasn't lost on Elena. You think this is where I belong? I think you already know where you belong, came the gentle reply. You're just giving yourself time to accept it. After they hung up, Elena stirred the pozole mechanically, her grandmother's words echoing in her mind. The decision had been forming for weeks, perhaps months, but she hadn't been ready to acknowledge it. The doorbell rang, pulling her from her thoughts. Alex stood in the hallway, raindrops still clinging to his coat, a bottle of wine in one hand, and a small wrapped package in the other. Sorry I'm a few minutes early, he said, leaning in to kiss her cheek. The rain let up, so I walked from the subway. Elena took his coat, hanging it to dry. Perfect timing. Dinner's almost ready. Alex presented the bottle, a special vintage they had discovered together on their first proper date, and followed her to the kitchen. Something smells amazing, he commented, peering into the pot. Your grandmother's recipe? Elena nodded, touched that he remembered. Comfort food for a rainy night. As they prepared to eat, Alex placed the small wrapped package beside her plate. I was going to save this for after dinner, but I think now might be better. Elena unwrapped it carefully to find a small silver frame. Inside was a photograph she'd never seen. Herself at the podium during the first board presentation, captured in profile. Her expression showed complete concentration, confidence radiating from her posture as she addressed the room of executives. "Where did you get this?" she asked, studying the image with wonder. "Caroline took it," Alex explained. "She thought you might want a memento of that day. I had it framed." Elena touched the glass gently. The woman in the photograph seemed simultaneously familiar and strange, recognizably her, yet so different from how she had seen herself 6 months ago. "Thank you," she said softly. "It's perfect." Over dinner, their conversation flowed naturally from work to personal topics, the boundaries between professional and private lives increasingly fluid. Alex updated her on his latest findings from the Newark office. Elena shared stories from her recent lunch with Caroline, who had become an unexpected ally and friend. As they finished eating, Alex asked the question that had been hovering unspoken all evening. "Have you decided about the position?" Elena met his gaze across the table. "I think I have." She took a deep breath. "I'm going to accept it." Alex's face brightened. "I was hoping you would. But with conditions," Elena continued. "I want to establish a scholarship program for Hale employees pursuing healthcare degrees, and I want flexibility to volunteer at community clinics quarterly. Finding ways to maintain your connection to healthcare," Alex observed. "Richard will agree to both." Elena nodded. "I realized something important today. The work I'm doing at Hale, giving voice to people who aren't being heard, creating systems that protect the vulnerable, transforming a culture, it's not so different from what drew me to nursing in the first place. Helping people," Alex said simply. "Yes, just on a different scale, in a different way." She reached for his hand across the table, and with unexpected companions on the journey. Later, after Alex had left with promises to meet early before the presentation, Elena stood again at her apartment window, watching the now gentle rain. 6 months of transformation, not just of Hale Industries but of herself. She thought of the black phone Richard had shown her today, the catalyst for everything that followed. One ordinary object, one moment of decision, one answered call. Tomorrow she would present their findings, closing the investigation chapter definitively. Next week she would accept the chief ethics officer position, opening a new chapter neither she nor Richard could have imagined when she first entered his home as household staff. The rain began to taper off, clouds parting to reveal glimpses of stars above the city lights. Elena thought of the mansion where everything had started, the marble halls she had once navigated silently, the study she had cleaned while invisible, the safe whose combination she had memorized without intention. Full circle, yet entirely transformed. The maid who had answered a forgotten phone had found her voice, and in doing so, had helped an entire company find its conscience. Elena smiled at the stars, thinking of her grandmother's wisdom. Some decisions did indeed need time to ripen, and some journeys began with the smallest, most ordinary actions, like answering a phone that wouldn't stop ringing. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new responsibilities, new opportunities to create change. But tonight, in this quiet moment between what had been and what would be, Elena Vasquez simply allowed herself to be present, grateful for the path that had led her here, and ready for whatever came next.